Ezreal has been one of the most popular ADCs in the entire decade that I've been playing this game, never once dropping off in popularity. This is because he is an incredibly fun and versatile pick. He can play as either a lane bully constantly poking away at his enemies when he gets the upper hand, or he can be the safest pick in the game, able to last hit from a great distance and being impossible to dive or catch out in any way. Add to this a heavily skill-based kit with a lot of room to improve on and fully master the champion, and you have a dream ADC for the average player. Ezreal's passive is the most overlooked portion of his kit, but is extremely important to play around. Scaling up to 50% bonus attack speed, this makes a huge difference in fights. In lane it is important that you keep it stacked up if you expect to fight soon, and you'll also want to stack it up as fast as possible when pushing in lane. The fact that missing an ability can lead to dropping all of your stacks just adds even further to Ezreal's reliance on skill shots. Ezreal's Q Mystic Shot is his main defining spell, which gives him strong poke and steady stream of DPS if you can consistently land it in fights. Because of the fact that it applies on-hit effects, it gives Ezreal strong synergy with Sheen and its upgrades. Though it behaves like an auto attack in many ways, it can't crit, thus crit items tend to be a poor choice in Ezreal as you want to itemize for his powerful Mystic Shot, poke and DPS. And one important thing to note about it is that every time you hit Mystic Shot, all your spell's cooldowns are reduced by 1.5 seconds, including Mystic Shot itself. This makes Ezreal skill amazingly with cooldown reduction, especially since it will reduce Mystic Shot by its full 4.5 second cooldown rather than its actual 3 second cooldown whenever you land it. Ability Haste also makes it more forgiving to miss your Q. We max this first because it's our main source of damage. Essence Flux is Ezreal's W. When it connects with an enemy, it deals no damage, but procs next time you hit them with an ability or auto attack in order to deal massive burst. When an enemy is tagged by your W, it'll also make your E prioritize hitting that target over any other enemies in range. Also important to note is that proccing Essence Flux will refund the mana cost of whichever ability procced it, plus 60 more mana, and your E is your highest mana cost ability besides your ultimate. Both combined, this makes W into E an extremely effective combo on Ezreal, by way of guaranteeing your E actually hits an important target and also refunding your most mana expensive ability when you might otherwise be concerned about the cost. Proccing this with an auto attack yields no mana return, so ideally you'll want to proc it with an ability. But don't feel too pressured into doing so, because it is also a great ability for Ezreal to trade through minions when he can't land Qs and can't risk using E. His W into auto attack combo is the only thing keeping Ezreal from being a sitting duck when he can't land Q through a wave. Ezreal's E, Arcane Shift, is one of the best mobility spells in the ADC role. It's a flash-like blink which then fires a homing bolt towards the nearest enemy, though as mentioned before, his W can guarantee that this will hit your desired enemy. It has a surprisingly high base damage too, as well as an AD ratio which makes this a non-trivial ability to be able to land onto your desired opponent. It starts off with an extremely high cooldown, but gets much lower with levels and as you stack CDR, and by the time you fully maxed it, it'll end up with almost no cooldown at all provided you are able to keep landing Mystic Shots. This ability combined with Mystic Shot is what makes Ezreal such a safe ADC that is so hard to punish. You max the second for the massive reduction in cooldown to keep yourself safe and enable you to go for more aggressive plays. Ezreal's Zar True Shot Barrage is a fully global ability which deals massive damage. Its uses range from sniping low HP enemies to massively chunking out the enemies before a fight starts, generating multiple passive stacks as you prepare for a fight, or just simply pushing minion waves. As of his buff on this patch, this ability now drops to a very low cooldown late game when you factor in Mystic Shot cooldown reductions, so you really don't have to shy away from just using this to help you shove waves or just going for poke. Its cooldown becomes nothing later on, so you want to make very liberal use of it in order to squeeze as much benefit out from it as possible. You can use this ability in combat, but the cast time is very long, so you'll have to predict exactly where the enemies will try to dodge in order to hit them. If you don't need to use it in a fight, then don't bother risking it, since it can also be flashed. However, one important thing to keep in mind is that the cast cannot be interrupted by CC, so if you know you're about to be hit by a CC, you can start casting R right as it hits you, and you will spend most if not all of the CC duration casting your ultimate, during which time you wouldn't have been able to do anything else anyway. In this way, you can either massively chunk out the enemies during your CC period or force them to move out of the way rather than punishing your own inability to move. At this point, I would like to invite you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying the video and wish to see more content like this, as well as any of my other educational ADC content. Ezreal's builds have become quite confusing in Season 12, so let me help you break them down. You basically have the Crown build, which is currently the most popular build, then you have the Lethality builds, the Divine Sunderer build, and the Trinity Force build. The Crown build and Lethality builds all share the same initial 2-item core of Essence Reaver into Mana Moon. Chain effects and Mana Moon are absolutely core to all Ezreal builds, so for the Crown and Lethality builds to work, Ezreal has to build a Sheen effect from Essence Reaver before he can move on to his Mythic. By this point you would have a large amount of tier stacks, so you'd also want to upgrade it to a mana moon to get the more mana power spike as soon as possible. The Crown build is the safest build of all. Crown turns your survivability up to 11 and makes it incredibly hard for assassins to deal with you, since once they get on top of you, they'll still have the Crown damage reduction passive to contend with. However, this build gives up a lot of damage since Ezreal's AP scalings are nowhere near as good as his AD scalings. In my opinion, this build is heavily overused, and you should gravitate more towards the more damage oriented builds unless you're super ahead. If you're behind, you'll deal no damage and the enemies won't even need to kill you to begin with. Building it while ahead ensures that you, as your team's win condition, are not going to be easy to take out. The lethality build tends to be overwhelmingly done with Duskblade, but honestly, all 3 lethality mythics are fine here. Duskblade is the most popular because the mythic passive gives Ezreal a ton of CDR, a stat that synergizes amazingly with his kit. However, the cooldown reduction is a bit overkill for his Q DPS and doesn't really allow him to land any more Qs between autos than he already could. However, the passive can make his Qs extremely bursty when it's up. Eclipse, despite providing no ability haste, gives more sustained damage than Duskblade and provides similar burst than a WQ combo. It also gives the greatest dueling power thanks to its Omnivamp and shield. Prowler's Claw provides the highest sustained damage of all onto anyone not building armor, as the mythic passive provides large amounts of lethality, and it offers the same 20 ability haste as Duskblade does. The active is fairly useless in Ezreal, and you can easily go multiple games without making any use of it, but that's fine because the mythic passive alone makes it worth it by being by far the best mythic passive of all the lethality mythics. Prowler's Claw is also Ezreal's highest win rate mythic, so potentially it may be highly underrated among the lethality mythics. Just don't bother building it over Eclipse into super tanky comps, since you'll get more value out of Eclipse's mythic passive. For the Trinity Force build, you'll want to rush Trinity Force after your tier and then build into Mana Moon. This build will give you the strongest 1 and 2 item power spike, but probably won't scale as well as the lethality builds. For the Divine Sunderer build, you'll want to do the same, but replacing Trinity Force, and this build will be your most effective build for dealing with tanks. After you've finished your core build, your dream items are Serylda's Grudge and Ravenous Hydra. Both items have massive synergy with Ezreal, being almost as valuable as mythics on him. Serylda's allows him to keep opponents permanently slowed as long as he keeps landing abilities, and Ravenous Hydra gives him some welcome wave clear and massive sustain, which can make him a much more effective duelist. Both items give large amounts of ability haste too, Ezreal's favorite stat. Other situational items you can build, which on lethality builds will have to replace one of these dream items, usually Ravenous Hydra, are Frozen Heart against high AD comps, Maw of Malmortius to survive AP burst, Kempunk Chainsword for healing reduction, Guardian Angel for general survivability, and Zhonya's Hourglass to dodge specific burst combos such as Rengar's or Zed's. Your starting items, regardless of build, should be either Doran's Blade or alongside 3 pots. You don't want to start here because it'll cost you too much lane pressure to not have any AD to start off with. Instead, build it on first base, where you'll still get enough tier stacks to get it stacked in time for your 2 item or mana power spike. And for boots, your only real choice are Ionian Boots of Lucidity. That just about covers everything you need to know in regards to Ezreal's itemization. Now let's talk about his runes. The current most popular keystone for Ezreal is Press the Attack. As of Conqueror's most recent nerfs, it's not quite as good on him as it used to be, and First Strike's nerf have also stopped it being the clear-cut favorite for him. Instead, people have resorted to PTA, which will give him the most dominant laning phase of any rune he can take. You can still run First Strike if you wish greater scaling, but I wouldn't advise running Conqueror except if you feel like it may be worthwhile against very tanky comps, since the nerf has made it suboptimal for Ezreal. People will commonly recommend taking PTA or Conqueror with DPS focused builds like Trinity Force, and First Strike with the burst tier lethality builds, but win rates don't seem to show any real difference between running any particular keystone with any particular build, besides First Strike being the clear best when paired with Crown. So unless you know in advance you'll be running Crown of the Shattered Queen, you can probably just run whatever keystone you prefer with whatever build you prefer. That's it for my Ezreal guide. I hope you guys have found this helpful. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and let me know in the comments any feedback or thoughts you have about the video and whether you'd like to see more of this style. Until next time, gamers.